Hey, everybody, once again with us, the man of the hour, Paul Craig Roberts, to tell us about what he thinks is really behind the Israeli-Hamas conflict and what was a hidden plan. Now, Paul, on your site today, a new article entitled "The Israeli-Hamas Conflict is a Continuation of the 9/11 Plot." What do you mean?
Okay. All right, Larry. We've been talking about this Israeli-Hamas situation and what might come out of it. And as it develops, and I think more, I begin to see, I think now, the whole picture. Now, this is speculative. I can't prove this, but it fits the pattern. It makes perfect sense. And so I was willing to put it out. But of course, it's different. It's not what people are hearing. And in that way, it's challenging. So here's the basic thrust of it is that the Hamas attack, it has all over it the Washington neocons' hands and Netanyahu's hands. Those hands are all over this. I don't think it's possible that this was an independent Hamas operation. And we've explained already in our interviews why I don't think that's true. And we have explained already in our interviews why this Hamas attack is looked upon with great favor by Netanyahu. Because, as you know, he said it gives him now an excuse, an opportunity to terminate Palestine and to have all of Palestine now part of Israel. And that this then makes him the great hero that gets rid of the two-state threat, and all of his legal and political problems will evaporate. So their motives, their incentives, and they're far more powerful on the neoconservative and Netanyahu side than they are on Hamas.
Paul, part of your suspicion of this being a planned, orchestrated operation is the rather peculiar, and I think you said originally puzzling, failure of the high-tech security system. I mean, the Gaza fence is supposed to be very secure, very high tech, and there was a total failure, which is still unexplained. So that was part of your suspicion, correct?
That was an instant suspicion, and it's just like 9/11.
Yeah.
The first thing that struck me about 9/11 was that if the total American national security state failed, and a few untrained Saudi Arabians without the benefit of any state or intelligence service was able to overwhelm American national security, you would have expected the president, the vice president, the Congress, the Defense Department, everybody who had been screaming and yelling to hold somebody accountable for this massive failure. And no one said a word about it. They didn't even want an investigation. You remember, it took over a year for President Bush to agree to let a politically appointed committee of non-experts listen to the government side of the story and write it down. That's what that was the explanation. Well, I was in the government. I was up there. I know how things work. This is impossible. You can't have a failure like that without heads rolling.
Some of those people were promoted, in fact.
Yeah, they're promoted, right? Promoted. Well, we see already the same thing in Israel. Nobody's been held accountable for this massive failure that cost all these Israeli lives and all this humiliation and embarrassment. See, that's another thing about 9/11. No one ever said, my word, a few Saudis with box cutters have delivered the most humiliating blow to a superpower in world history. Nobody ever said that, but that's what 9/11 was. A few guys out of nowhere defeated the superpower and made a monkey out of it. Well, that's now happened in Israel. These so-called animals and barbarians and whatever, they get called everything, these Palestinians. They have now humiliated and made a monkey out of Israel. Well, you would think people would be screaming and yelling for accountability. How did it fail? People would be fired, demoted, indicted. It's a massive failure. And I had to listen today to Ron Unz, who has his own website, tell me that, well, you see, the trouble with what you're saying is that the Palestinians outsmarted the Israelis. They had these drones. They sent these drones, and the drones went in and disabled the barrier. And I said, how could anybody think this? The barrier is fail-safe. It can't be disabled without the alarm going off. I don't know for a fact that it is. I've not ever investigated. I wouldn't be able to. I'd have to have Israeli security clearances, probably also American ones, because I think we had a lot to do with the technology and all. But it's implausible that Israel would build an old-fashioned barrier like barbed wire that wasn't fail-safe. If somebody can come up and cut it and it doesn't go off, then what's the good of having the barrier? They can come in without being warned, without any warning. So the barrier has to be fail-safe. It's modern, it's technology. And so what Ron said, I said, well, Ron, look, it's a fail-safe barrier. You can't disable it. If you disable it, it sets it off. So the way people are thinking is just it's not sensible.
Another thing that they brought up was that, well, Israel was let its guard down because Hamas started showing some interest in having Palestinians go work at Israeli jobs and come back and forth. So therefore, they were no longer the threat that they once were, which also sounds ridiculous,
Right.
Especially when they did so much to secure that they've made it an open air prison. Some people say concentration camp, and that's those are loaded words considering history.
Well, they're factual words. They're not loaded, they're factual. And what's also wrong with that claim that they're making is that, according to news reports that are accepted and not refuted, Israel was warned that something was afoot by Egypt and by the United States. The American intelligence agents said, we knew something was afoot, we warned them. The Egyptian government said, we knew something was afoot, we warned them. So they've got warnings, and yet, based on the presumption that they may let Palestinians come in later to work and go back, they turned it off, or they went away. What did they do exactly? In any kind of a organization, any organization is bureaucratic, and they continue to run bureaucratically. The barriers constantly patrolled. See, I think there are three levels of this barrier. There's the physical barrier, and then there are the troops that go along all the time, and they're never but a few minutes away from any point. And so...
And where were the troops?
Yeah, right. They were asleep somewhere, and allegedly Israel killed them in their sleep and captured all the generals.
Yeah.
I had to hear that today. Oh, the Israelis wouldn't let them capture their own generals. Well, why not? If it serves the agenda. But they didn't capture any generals that I know of. This is just... You see, all the information that comes out, there are people at work planning all kind of false stories to confuse everything so nobody can figure out what really happened. I remember James Jesus Angleton, the chief of CIA counterintelligence, sitting down with me one day and telling me precisely how they did that.
He was a legend. With his,
And he said that you can't ever find out. This was during the church committee hearings. He said, you can't ever find out what we're doing. So sometimes we don't know ourselves. So he said we have so many cover stories, we forget which one's true.
And how easily the media and even people on the internet who are supposed to be independent researchers, how easily they accept any of these lines that are put out. We know without verification, without even, intellectual curiosity, does it make sense? It's amazing how everything is just swallowed because it comes from the U.S. or it comes from Israel.
So here we have it then. I'm going to explain. What do I mean? Yeah. It's an effort to reopen the Middle Eastern wars. That's basically what this is. It's an effort to reopen the Middle Eastern wars.
Which is a continuation. Explain that. A continuation of 9/11 plot.
This is a continuation of the 9/11 plot, and now I'm going to explain what I mean. And again, this is my speculation. Netanyahu didn't call me up and tell me this, and neither did the neocons in the Biden administration. But I know who they are. I've known all of them for decades. But here's my story. And it's controversial from the beginning because not most, but a lot of people still believe the official 9/11 story, which makes no sense. For example, when we've already said a few Saudi Arabians outwit the entire American national security state, and no one's held accountable. Well, this makes no sense. Also, look, on the same morning, the same hour, in 4 different airports, airport security fails. Well, if these type of 9/11 failures were possible, we probably wouldn't still be here. The Soviets could have blown us off the face of the earth decades ago. We never would have even known it. If the Air Force can't get up interceptors against 4 hijacked planes, traffic control doesn't know where the hijacked planes are. I mean, this is a picture of just total incompetence and total incapacity.
But Paul, you're forgetting how well they actually recovered the passport of the lead hijacker. That was unscathed, and all that rubble, everything was dust, everything was burned, but the passport was intact, proving that it was the hijackers, the lead hijacker.
Laying right on the top.
Yeah.
Unsinged. Yeah. But
nobody thought that was curious at all. All these investigative reporters with the networks and all that, nobody even raised the question of how is that possible?
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm interrupting.
Well, there were many aspects about it, but the main aspect is the national security state can't fail to that extent. And a fail-safe barrier can't either. It can't fail to the extent that is part of the official story of the Hamas attack. So what was 9/11? It was a plot by the neoconservatives to create an excuse, the war on terror, for their Mideast wars that their own publications available today in public call for, which was the elimination of the suppliers of the Lebanese militia Hezbollah. And these suppliers, they named 7 countries. And Norman Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary, the Jewish Intellectual magazine, he describes that our goal in coming years must be to overthrow these 7 countries in 5 years. And later we heard General Wesley Clark, the 4-star general who was the commander of NATO forces in Europe, say on TV that I went by the Pentagon, and my former subordinates called me in and said, General, look, we've got this war plan to eliminate 7 countries in 5 years. It was word for word for what the neocons had been calling for. Well, of course, by then the neocons were running the Pentagon. They had all the policy positions. So the purpose of 9/11, it was an inside job. It was orchestrated. This is now undeniable because we know all 3 of those buildings came down from explosives, controlled demolition. There's no doubt about it any longer. And that then gives them an excuse to send American troops to the Middle East. They blame bin Laden, who was a longtime CIA agent, our guy against the Soviets in Afghanistan. We have the photographs of Brzezinski, my colleague for many years, and Carter's national security advisor there at the Khyber Pass with bin Laden and Tommy gun. And so the war on terror. Well, that was the only terrorist event we had. Why did they stop? If all these terrorists are overwhelming us and they can humiliate us by blowing up part of the Pentagon and bringing down our tallest buildings and causing all that confusion and chaos, why did they stop? You remember all events after were staged FBI terrorist events. They had to go out and find some group and infiltrate them and put them up to something and then arrest them. And the FBI always said, public was never in danger. Well, of course not. They were in charge of it. The FBI was in charge. So, and I'm getting off the tack here. So 9/11 was the excuse to go to war. And the targets were Iraq, Syria, Iran, because they supplied Hezbollah, and Hezbollah won't let Israel into southern Lebanon to occupy that area and get the water. And so the reasoning of the neocons and the Israeli government was, well, look, if we knock out Iraq, Syria, and Iran, there's no one to supply Hezbollah. There's no financing, there's no weapons, and there's the obstacle to Israel going into Lebanon is over. Moreover,
get water, among other things.
They would get the water resources. So there's a big river there, and they've gone in twice trying to get it, and Hezbollah has driven them out. So that's that groundwork. Also, the Zionists, who are not a majority of Israelis or Jews, but they're the organized driving force of all of this. And they have a concept of greater Israel. Now, what is greater Israel? According to the Zionists, Israel consists not just of all of Palestine. It consists of, it's from the Nile to the Euphrates. So it's from Egypt into half of Iraq. I think Euphrates runs to the middle of Iraq. So you're talking about from one bank of the Nile, that part of Egypt, all the way into half of Iraq. So it's all that territory, which is Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, whatever's there. And that's greater Israel, and this is the goal of the Zionists. It's not limited to all of Palestine. And so if Syria and Iraq and Iran are out of it because we've destroyed them, we did destroy Iraq. Iraq is out of it, but Syria and Iran are still there. Well, Syria was next in line. You may remember Obama announced an invasion of Syria. Remember, he said they crossed the red line. They used chemical weapons against their own people. People probably forgotten this. And we were about to invade Syria. And all of a sudden, the next day, we learned that Putin was there and the Russian Air Force was there. And we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
He either saw it coming or got there first. And so we couldn't send our troops. We sent the CIA's jihadists to try to overthrow Assad. We pretended they were the moderates fighting for democracy. And the Russian Air Force and the Syrian forces defeated them. Well, this really upset the neocons. And they've been dying to find some way to get back at Russia for stopping their overthrow of Syria. Well, now you see how the picture gets bigger. The intent of this plot, the neocons and Netanyahu, is not limited to Hamas. That is what they're using to suck into the war Hezbollah and Iran. Because once they're sucked in, and that's the whole purpose for the neocons, have our aircraft carrier task force there, the 101st Airborne Division, the Marines, the Special Forces. It's so that when the attack on Gaza pulls in Hezbollah and Iran, now we have the excuse. We have to protect Israel. And our real target, of course, is not Hamas or protecting Israel. It's Syria and Iran. And so this is the way I explain it. It's a continuation of the original neoconservative goal of destroying the opponents of Israel in the Middle East. This lets Israel have the water, but also opens up the area to other Israeli expansions, more of Syria. They've already got part of Syria, they get more of Syria, and they can go on from there. And the way the plot works is the Israelis let it happen. Would they kill their own people? Of course, because it lets them have greater Israel. So the plot works and the propaganda comes out and everybody's on Israel's side and no one's going to stop them. And whatever they do in Palestine, in Gaza, is supposed to pull in Hezbollah and Iran, and then we're there to use that as our excuse, and there we go against Syria and Iran. So that's what's really unfolding. So how is it going to work? Will it work or not? Well, it depends. Because if you notice, something very strange has come out of this. We now have Putin and Biden on the same side.
Yeah.
And the neocons and the Republicans on the other. Yeah. Who's egging this war on? It's all the Republicans. Yeah. And the neocons. The neocons in the Biden administration and the Republican Party. Who's trying to stop it? Putin is over there restraining Iran and Hezbollah. He's doing everything he can to say, don't do nothing, don't do nothing, don't do nothing. And what is Biden doing? Somehow, somebody has gotten through the neocon net that surrounds Biden and pointed out what's really going on. And Biden is over there trying to restrain Netanyahu. He keeps saying, don't invade, don't invade. He keeps saying, don't commit atrocities like Hamas did. Don't. So you've got Biden trying to restrain the Israelis, and you've got Putin trying to restrain the Muslims, and you've got the Republicans, especially the ones in the House, the new speaker, and the crazy ones in the Senate, like Lindsey Graham. They're all saying we have to obliterate Hamas forever with kill all the Palestinians. A lot of them are saying they have to kill all the Palestinians, exterminate them. Genocide is not a bad word. They're saying things like that. And these are Republicans. And you see, a lot of the Republicans are evangelicals.
Yeah.
And the evangelicals are much influenced by Israel. A lot of them worship Israel instead of God, like that. What's that? Pat Hagee, isn't that his name? Has the big church.
Yeah.
If you listen to one of those things, it's like you're worshiping Israel. So you can see all of that force. And so we now have this curious situation. Will Biden and Putin are on the same side, trying to keep this from exploding. And the neocons, who are all in the Democratic Biden administration, and the Republicans, all on the other side, trying to make it explode.
Hagee and the others, Paul, the evangelicals, they're pushing for this final war, for Armageddon to take place as in Revelations, so that the end times will be brought in, and it's a return of Christ, and then everybody is saved. So they're actually hoping that this plays out into Armageddon.
Yeah, I've forgotten all the details of Revelation. Was once very thorough, acquainted with them. I think they expect to be wafted up to heaven.
Yeah, they're going to be taken up.
They avoid, if they're Christians, they're taken away, and they avoid the conflict that ends the world.
Yeah, the rapture.
See, they get the rapture, and they're not here to suffer through the four horsemen.
Yeah, exactly.
And the destruction of earth.
Yeah.
So you can see how risky it is, because they want it.
Yeah.
They want it to happen.
Yeah.
And this is what Biden and Putin, and now allied, are trying to prevent.
Will they?
Who knows? Who knows? See, I think that I think Putin can prevail over Iran and Hezbollah, not to intervene. And so then the neocon, not the Netanyahu plot, fails. I mean, he may get Palestine, but that they want more. They want greater Israel. I don't mean all at once, but they want to get everything out of the way of greater Israel, and that's Iran and Syria,
yeah.
and the Hezbollah militia in Lebanon. They want those out of the way. So what will happen if Putin doesn't let Iran and Hezbollah take the bait and rush in? The neocons will have a false flag.
Where?
Over there, they'll have they'll send rockets on to Israel. And then they'll say, see, Iran did it. And they'll use that false flag to start the bigger war. They want the bigger war. Now, as we've talked previously, I don't think we can win the bigger war. But they are very confident. They're so confident that they can't imagine not winning it. So
if Iran does come in, and maybe even Jordan, the other nations, and it stays conventional, doesn't go nuclear, could we win that? We got carriers there, we've got the ground troops massing now in Jordan. So I imagine they're thinking that they could keep this conventional and we could prevail. Is that realistic?
Well, that's what they think. No, it's not.